Welcome to Carrion Creature Feature. I'm your host, Jeramy Burke-Miller. In tonight's episode, we explore the dark side of waste removal as three young professionals find themselves locked in a struggle for survival. Before we begin our blood-soaked story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay tuned for more thrilling tales of fright. Now, it's time to suit up, because this cleaning job is about to get messy.
Prologue. The most intimate knowledge you'll get from a person is when you clean up after them. When you're cleaning, you see a side of a person that many never do. You see their trash, their stains, their unwashed dishes, their reckless behavior, their filthy toilets, their disregard for pet care, their laziness, their ignorance, their financial problems, their insecurities, their hygiene habits, their sex life, their family, and lastly, their humanity, or lack of it. As Lawrence J. Peters says, cleaning anything involves making something else dirty, but anything can get dirty without something else getting clean. 1. We sat parked outside as rain lashed against the van's windshield, each drop a tiny hammer striking with the storm's fury. Through the blurry glass, the decrepit Victorian wasn't much to look at, with its peeling paint and rotted wood siding. Large ornate iron bars crisscrossed the windows on the first and second floors. The yard was a mix of overgrown weeds and trash that complemented the dilapidated exterior. A large steel dumpster sat only feet away from the front porch. "Another day, another shithole," Jesse said from the back of the van. Randall took a sip of coffee, his voice tinged with frustration. "I go to college and this is where I'm at? Fuck me, bro." I shifted behind the steering wheel, taking out the work order form. The house belonged to a widower who died about 3 weeks ago. Family took one look inside and said, "Fuck this place." Most of the house is infested with German cockroaches and other vermin, so keep your suit and respirator on. If you find anything of value, including money, let me know. Don't just start pocketing shit. "If I find something, that shit's going toward my loans," Randall scoffed. "You find something, you turn it in, and we label it. Family gets 30 days to pick it up. Then it's a 3-way split," I said, looking directly at Randall. "What about the storm?" Jesse interrupted, concern creeping into his voice as he glanced at the heavy rain. "We're working inside. The porch is covered. Should be no problem to move stuff out and throw it in the dumpster," I replied, opening the van door, trying to project confidence despite my own apprehensions. Outside, the rain came down steadily as dark clouds churned in the sky. The low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, followed by bright flashes of lightning. We quickly ran through the yard, up the porch, and then to the front entrance. Once at the front door, I retrieved a partially soaked envelope from my pocket containing the key to the residence. Securing the respirator over my face, I proceeded to unlock the front door. Inside, the house was overflowing with rubbish. Piles of soiled clothes lined the foyer, while a moldy couch blocked the stairs. In the main den, stacks of old magazines reached the ceiling, the floor hidden by mounds of trash. Jesse switched on his flashlight, illuminating a cluster of roaches nesting in the transom above the entrance. "Jesus," Randall said, pushing past an old wicker basket filled with dirty children's toys. "Let's start here and cut a path to the den," I said, holding the front door open. Jesse picked up a large, leaking trash bag, exposing a puddle of black sludge underneath. With one quick motion, he slung the bag to the front porch and turned back to collect a stack of waterlogged books. For a few minutes, we worked tossing out the junk and creating a path that allowed me to advance deeper into the house. Behind me, Randall groaned as he lifted a pair of shoes caked in dried rat urine. With a little more navigation through the heaps of garbage, I was able to enter the den, where a large Zenith TV sat on a cabinet, surrounded by a collection of empty Campbell's soup cans with plastic utensils sticking out of them. There was a small trodden path leading to what I presumed to be the kitchen. On the far wall hung a framed picture of an old man dressed in ritualistic robes and a large golden necklace. The attire reminded me of something a Masonic member might wear, with gold-embroidered rats on the sleeves of the jacket. The man in the picture seemed to be genuinely happy, a stark contrast to the squalor of the home. I paused in mid-step, my ears perking up to the loud, muffled words coming from upstairs. It sounded like Jesse and Randall were arguing. The voices grew more intense the longer I listened. It wasn't uncommon for the two to bicker, but I never heard them argue with this intensity. With one last look at the den, I turned and made my way back to the foyer. Randall and Jesse, now on the second floor, prompted me to climb the stairs until I was in front of a bedroom where they both stood. Adjacent to the bedroom was a junk-filled hallway with rooms on each end. Both Randall and Jesse had their respirators pulled off and seemed to be pacing back and forth.
Fuck, bro. I didn't sign up for this shit,
Randall shouted, panic lacing his voice. Jesse leaned in the doorway, his eyes wild with panic, causing me to hesitate before entering the bedroom. In the center, a small child's mummified body sat on a chair. The body was wrapped in leather straps, its mouth gagged with a red plastic ball. Beneath the chair, 2 blocks of wood with rusty nails pierced the child's shriveled feet. The room itself was painted in a dull pastel pink color, strange symbols decorating the walls and ceiling. A tripod and camcorder stood in the opposite corner with a lazy boy recliner. Beside the recliner, a waste can overflowed with discolored Kleenexes and a large leather flail with dried blood on the tips. My stomach lurched at the sight, spurring me to remove my mask to avoid throwing up. A sickening feeling crawled up into my chest. I just needed to breathe, needed to get outside. The oily musk of the room filled my nostrils.
Out now,
I shouted, motioning for the two to join me. Randall looked at me, his face slick with sweat.
I'm calling the cops, bro.
I took Jesse by the arm, leading him into the hallway. We were feet away from the steps when my left foot sank down into the floor. Pausing, I inspected the spot where my foot was now a good 3 inches into the floor. Lifting my foot up, a loud mechanical clink echoed in the hallway. Randall, who was already on the top step, jerked back, grabbing the stair railing.
What the fuck, bro?
Randall shouted, his voice high-pitched with fear. Confused, I let go of Jesse, moving between Randall and the staircase. To my amazement, the stairs had dropped against the wall on hinges through a mechanical support release. Now I was looking at the basement below, the gap extending the full length of the staircase, the drop being at least 30 feet down to the bottom, where large, sharpened rebar spikes pointed up from the floor. "It's a trap," I said, turning to meet Jesse and Randall.
What do you mean, a trap?"
Jesse stammered. I walked back to the spot where I stepped earlier, brushing the refuse away to reveal a large metal plate. "This must be a pressure plate," I said, pointing down. A look of confusion stretched over Randall's face as he slowly got up to his feet.
You mean this place is rigged up like some twisted version of Home Alone?
Randall said, his eyes searching mine for some kind of reassurance. "I don't know. Could be just the one trap," I said, trying to calm the situation and myself.
"Anybody got their phone?"
Jesse asked, desperation creeping into his voice. I reached for my pockets instinctively, remembering I left my phone inside the van. "In the van," I replied. Randall put his hand up to his forehead, letting out a loud gasp of air.
"Oh, me too."
"Fuck, no one has a phone," Jesse said. I stepped back to the top of the staircase. A stack of garbage bags kept the front door open. Outside, thunder rumbled as the storm grew closer. I studied the railing, trying to gauge if I could straddle it and slide down. Leaning out, I tested my weight on the rail, the wood protesting with a loud crack. "Stairs are off limits," I said, turning back to Jesse and Randall. "Windows?" Jesse suggested, his voice tinged with a flicker of hope.
Most of them had bars on the outside, but we could try,"
Randall replied, though he sounded uncertain. "I think it's best we wait things out. The place might have other traps," I said, trying to sound confident even though doubt gnawed at me.
"Bro, it's Friday. That means the office closes at 4:30, and no one will be back till Monday morning,"
Randall retorted, panic rising in his voice. Jesse held his finger up, motioning for us to stop talking. "I got an idea. If we can find the attic access, I might be able to get through the window there." "I don't know, Jesse. Seems pretty risky," I replied. "Risky? This whole place could be a death trap. You think we'll be safe if we stay put?" Jesse countered, determination hardening his features. Randall, clearly frustrated by the circumstance, threw his respirator on the floor, kicking it against the wall. Jesse reached out to calm him, but Randall brushed his hand away.
"Fuck this, bro,"
Randall said as he started down the hallway to a closed door at the end. "Hold up, man," I said, following behind him. Randall grabbed the doorknob tightly, looking back at me with an expression of anger.
"I ain't waiting in this shithole to be rescued,"
Randall said, turning the knob and opening the door. A deafening explosion erupted from the room, sending shards of wood and plaster flying. I held my hands up to my face, my ears still ringing from the blast, dust particles floating in the open air. Then came the screaming. Randall crashed against the wall, clutching his right arm below the wrist. Muscle and bone splintered out, resembling a morbid flower. Bright red blood spurted forth as a look of sheer terror washed across his face. Jesse pushed me down, running over towards Randall and wrapping his belt around the arm. Randall's face lit up with pain as Jesse cinched the belt down, torquing it with a piece of wood he picked up from the floor. Yelling, lots of yelling between the two of them. Randall screaming while Jesse fought with him to stop the bleeding. Still in shock, I touched my face, feeling a wet bump. I pressed it with my index finger until a small brass BB fell to the floor. I'd been shot, or at least caught one of the pellets from the initial blast. In the doorway, an 8-inch hole was blown right below the doorknob. Darren, wake the fuck up, Darren. I need your help," Jesse shouted. Randall's eyes shifted to the ceiling, his face turning pale as Jesse managed to clamp the belt around his arm. "We gotta get him some help, now," Jesse said, looking at me. Still half dazed, I stood balancing against the blood-splattered wall. Jesse moved in front of me, carefully opening the door where Randall had been standing earlier. In front of the room, duct taped to a table, was a shotgun pointed toward the entrance. Fishing line ran up to a series of pulleys that connected to an eye bolt fastened to the door.
"Holy shit!"
Jesse exclaimed, moving deeper into the room. A copper bed frame with stained pillows and a blanket rested in the corner. My eyes adjusted to the dim light from the outside window, coming to rest on the attic axis above. "There," I said, pointing to the ceiling. Jesse looked up, giving a nod of confirmation. "I'll give you a boost," I said, moving under the axis and cupping my hands. Jesse steadied himself on my shoulder, stepping into my hand as I lifted him upward. He snatched the cord with ease, landing back on his feet. With a tug, he pulled the access open, a small wooden ladder unfolding. "I'm going up. Make sure that tourniquet stays on," Jesse said, taking hold of the ladder. "Be careful up there," I replied, studying the ladder as he ascended the steps. Jesse took one more look at me, disappearing into the darkness of the attic. I sat at the foot of the ladder, listening as he methodically moved across the beams. Moving back to the hallway, Randall sat slouched over, his eyes drowsy from blood loss. He was mumbling something incoherent, his face now gaunt, lips blue. I brushed the hair from his eyes, taking a few seconds to check his body for additional wounds. 2. "Hang in there, Randall. Jesse's going to get help," I said. As if on cue, a groan came from the ceiling above. Jesse was right on top of us, moving closer to the front of the house. This had to work. He had to get out.
Darren, I can see the attic window.
Jesse's muffled voice came from the ceiling.
Great. How far are you from it?
I yelled back, pausing to listen. Thunder boomed outside as rain came down in torrents.
I'm almost there,
Jesse shouted, the rain blocking out his words. I stood looking at the ceiling, straining my ears to make out what he was saying. A faint squeak came from down the hall, inside the child's room. I leaned over the railing, trying to get a closer look, the door blocking my field of vision. Then something crawled into the entranceway, something low to the ground with matted fur. A dog, perhaps, but the movements were off, the body resembling more of a person than an animal. It skittered in and out of view from behind the door, eliciting a deep, wet cough. Could it be a person still trapped in here like us? Maybe a victim who had been surviving since the death of the homeowner. Cautiously, I tiptoed down the hall, careful to keep my distance. Above me, the ceiling whined as Jesse balanced between the attic beams. I drew closer to the room, the rain outside masking my steps. I could see the child's body in the far left corner of the room, but the figure was gone. I took another step, my upper body now inside the room, my hip anchored against the frame. My eyes shifted, searching the recesses of the room, until settling on an open hatch hidden behind the recliner. Slowly, I approached, seeing a crawl space that tunneled under the floor. Not taking any chances, I quietly shut the trap door, pushing the recliner on top of it.
I'm at the window,
Jesse shouted from above. Before I could respond, a deep scratching sound came from behind the wall in front of me. The sound shifted with weight, causing specks of dust to float through the room. Whatever it was now climbing up towards the attic.
Jesse, something's climbing towards you,
I yelled. More sounds from above, now in the ceiling. Weight shifting on the wooden beams, wet coughing. Then a scream reverberated through the house. It was Jesse struggling, trying to fend off whatever was up there with him. The plaster in the ceiling buckled, then cracked as Jesse's work boot punched through. He kicked wildly in the air, trying to free himself, the ceiling coming apart until he fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Jesse lay motionless, covered in insulation and gypsum. I stooped down, trying to check him for injuries, when two pink, fleshy hands emerged from the hole. The figure moved closer into the light, its face matted with damp fur, eyes black as coal, and whiskers that brushed against the boards of the attic. Its mouth opened, exposing 4 jagged incisors, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. A thick necklace of gold hung around its neck. I stared in disbelief at what I was seeing. It was a rat, or at least something akin to a rat. Behind its black eyes exuded an ancient, menacing intelligence. The creature seemed to be plotting something as it glared back at me. Then, with a quick jerk, it backed away out of my sight. "Jesse, wake up. We gotta move," I said, shaking his chest. The wall in front of me vibrated. The creature was now climbing back down to the crawl space. "Wake up," I pleaded, crawling from under the hardwood floors.
Jesse, wake up!
I shouted, slapping him across the face. Jesse's eyes fluttered open, staring back at me with a look of confusion. The recliner bumped a few inches into the air as the creature tried to open the hatch. Jesse sat up, the realization of where and what was happening flooding back to him. He turned to me, taking my hand as I lifted him to his feet. The recliner bounced again, this time with enough force to send it toppling over. We ran from the room, the trapdoor flying open just as we closed the door behind us. Jesse stumbled to the railing as I held the doorknob tightly in my hand.
What the fuck was that?
Jesse shouted. Just then, the door pulled forward with immense strength. I struggled to keep the door closed as Jesse frantically looked around, scooping up a broken chair leg. My hands were losing grip on the knob, beads of sweat collected on my forehead.
I can't hold it much longer,
I shouted. Jesse took hold of my shoulder, yanking me clear of the doorway and sending me falling backwards. The door ripped open, the creature scrambling on all fours into the hallway. Jesse swung the chair leg with all his might, the wood splintering against the rat's skull. Despite the blow, the rat lunged forward, snapping its jagged teeth inches from Jesse's face. To my left, a broom lay partially covered by a cardboard pizza box. Taking the handle into both of my hands, I forced it down, snapping it across my knee. I held the broken pieces up, choosing to keep the one with the sharpest point. Jesse was now being pushed closer to the front steps, his shouting becoming more desperate. I steadied my breathing, rushing forward and driving the broom handle into the side of the rat. At the same time, Jesse sidestepped, sending the creature forward using its own momentum and plummeting off the staircase. A sickening crash from below came as the rat hit the basement floor, two of the sharpened rebar puncturing its chest. We both looked below as the creature writhed in agony, its solid black eyes bulged with pain. Viscous blood oozed from its open mouth.
What the fuck is that?
Jesse exclaimed. Without answering, a stream of hot bile and morning breakfast spewed outward. I retched hard until my side hurt. Looking away from the creature, the glint of gold caught my attention as the necklace it had worn dangled on the railing. I reached out, taking it with my hand, feeling the solid weight of the jewelry. If this was real, it had to be worth a small fortune, I thought, draping the necklace over my head. Jesse moved back over to Randall, inspecting his condition. Do you think we can still get out from the attic? I asked, wiping the vomit from my mouth. I think so. I was able to get the window open. What about him? I said, looking at Randall. Randall's glazed eyes looked back at me, giving me a thumbs up with his other hand. He's good for now, but we need to make sure he doesn't go into shock. Grab a few of those pillows from the other room so we can prop his legs up, Jesse said. I nodded, making my way back to the room with the attic access. There, I began stripping the pillows off the copper bed frame when a small cardboard box fell onto the blanket. I grabbed the box, reading the label, Winchester, 12-gauge double-aught buckshot. 4 shells remained inside, but I had no use for them. I had to get back to Jesse. Walking back into the hallway, we lowered Randall onto his back, elevating his legs with the pillows. This seemed to bring some color back into his face as the blood flowed back down towards his head. Jesse wedged the extra pillow between Randall and the wall, allowing us to raise the mangled limb. Okay, this should do for now. We just gotta keep him awake, Jesse said. I'll go this time. It makes more sense for you to stay here. You know more about this medical stuff than I do, I replied. Eagle Scout, Jesse said with a smile. What? You're an Eagle Scout? You've gotta be shitting me, I laughed. Jesse shook his head in affirmation. With all the badges, too. Our conversation was suddenly cut short by an ear-piercing shriek that came from the basement. I stood looking from atop the stairs as the rat shrieked once more. It must be crying out in pain, I thought. But then another thought made me shudder. What if it was screaming for help? Jesse, I don't think that was the only one, I said. What? Jesse replied, standing back up. The house came alive with the sounds of scratching as things moved within the darkness. The wounded rat shrieked again, louder and more desperate. Sounds of hidden movement came from all around us. We gotta move Randall, I shouted. Jesse bent down, sticking his hands underneath Randall's arms to drag him. The pain caused Randall to jolt awake.
Bro, what's going on? What the fuck?
Randall said, pointing towards the child's room. A black rat the size of a St. Bernard crawled into view. Behind it, another dropped from the hole where Jesse fell.
Fuck! We gotta move, now!
I shouted as Jesse and I dragged Randall into the adjacent room. I slammed the door shut, barricading it with the table that the shotgun sat taped to. Looking through the blasted hole in the door, more rats congregated in the hallway. I reached into my pocket, retrieving my pocket knife, and began cutting the shotgun free.
Grab those shells on the bed,
I shouted to Jesse. Jesse looked around the room until he saw the box of shotgun shells. Hurrying over, he grabbed the box, putting them into my free hand. Nervously, I unlocked the lever, removing the spent shell and inserting another one into the chamber. Holding the stock up to my cheek, I pulled back the hammer, taking aim at the door. From the attic access, a dingy gray rat climbed down, its teeth glistening in the dim light as thick ropes of saliva dripped from its snarling mouth. I pointed, firing the shotgun. The stock kicked hard into my shoulder as the pellets ripped into the rat's body, causing it to fall from the ladder. Working the lever, I opened the chamber, pulling the spent shell out and loading the gun. The door splintered as the rats pushed against it from the hallway. From above, the ceiling broke open, a brown rat bursting through the rafters, landing on top of Randall as he lay motionless on the floor. The beast dug its long teeth into his neck, blood spewing from Randall's mouth. Aiming the shotgun at the rat, I pulled the trigger, sending it flying across the room and slamming into the wall. Jesse reached over to Randall as the door broke loose from the frame.
Jesse, get back!
I shouted, loading the shotgun. The table pushed free from the door, and the rats rushed in like a tidal wave of sharp teeth and mangy fur. In an instant, they were on Jesse, pulling him in all directions as he fought to free himself. I couldn't get a clear shot as they pulled him back into the hall, biting and tearing at his body. I watched in horror as several of the rats began to chew down his right arm until it tore free in a gush of bright red gore. Jesse's face was locked in silent terror as he vanished within the ranks of the ravenous pack. Mortified by the brutality, I looked away to the window. My only hope of escape was getting past the bars. I smashed the glass out using the butt of the gun and then proceeded to kick at the bars using all my weight. Behind me, the rats were still feasting on Jesse, and at any moment their attention would shift back to me. I kicked again and again, the bars starting to give way as rain and wind whipped through the broken window, mingling with the stale decay of the house. Then an angry grunting came from behind me. I slowly turned, my blood running cold, as my eyes looked up to a rat that towered over me in the center of the room. It stood on its back legs akin to a grizzly bear, dark wet fur shining in the light from the window. On its chest was a thick golden necklace like the other, only bigger. My legs grew heavy at the sight of the enormous creature. Its putrid smell wafted in the humid air, causing me to back away until my back pressed against the bars of the window. I lifted the shotgun just as the creature pounced forward, knocking me to the floor. I gasped for air, the weight of the rat pressing down on top of me. A searing hot pain bellowed up from my left leg as the rat sunk its teeth deep into my flesh. My muscles seized with pain as I was lifted into the air and slammed to the floor. For a moment, I was outside my body, watching as the giant rat continued its savage attack. Randall's lifeless eyes stared back at me from the corner of the room. My right hand still held the shotgun as the rat continued to bite into my leg. It would be so simple to watch the end of my life play out here. So simple to allow the warmth of death to wash away the fear. To return meant I would have to endure pain, more pain than I'd ever experienced. Then there was anger. Deep inside me, it came bursting forth in waves of hate. These fucking rats had killed Randall and Jesse, and now they were killing me. I thought about the child that had endured so much suffering, and the sick bastard that had created this hellhole. Rage flowed through me like gasoline to fire, my heart pumping pure adrenaline, and I was back in my body. The weight of the rat was still unbelievable, but I was able to turn my hips. The action seemed to anger the rat as it released me and started moving towards my face. I pressed my injured leg into its belly, pushing with all my strength until my chest and arms were free. The rat opened its mouth as it glared back at me with unbridled malice, just as I shoved the barrel of the shotgun into its maw. "Fuck you," I spat, pulling the trigger and exploding the rat's head in a geyser of blood and brains that washed over me. The beast went limp, falling atop of me and pinning my legs to the floor. The rats seemed to back up, their noses sniffing the air. They could smell the death of their alpha, and it struck fear into them. They began to retreat down the hall as I freed myself. I reached down, taking the necklace from the rat and putting it around my neck. Some part of me had changed. A darkness that had passed from the homeowner to the rats, and now to me. A supernatural feeling of dominance and, at the center, the colony that now hid in the basement of the home. I was the alpha now, and the rats would follow me anywhere. That is, until I died, or they found someone stronger. Epilogue. It's been 6 months since the hellish encounter, and not a day goes by I don't think of Randall and Jesse. For the most part, I've healed up physically, but the bite on my leg led to a nasty infection that kept me in the hospital for a month. Did I mention I fell out the window after breaking the bars free? Guess the blood loss made me pass out in mid-climb. It's a good thing I didn't break anything serious. I laid in the mud and rain for what seemed like hours. It's a wonder I didn't drown. Lucky for me, a passing motorist decided to pull over and render first aid. When the authorities asked me about what happened, I told them everything, which went as best as you might think a story about giant rats might go. The house has since been razed by the state. Police and rescue crew found an additional 10 bodies inside the house, making the late owner a prolific serial killer. The media shitstorm that followed was something unseen since Ted Bundy defended himself in court. I must admit, some of the headlines like Death House and the Victorian Crypt on Mason were catchy. But I could never read the articles. Why would I need to? I mean, I survived it. My necklaces proved to be too tempting, disappearing on my arrival at the hospital. It would seem a nurse, who was also a budding rapper, needed some bling for an upcoming video. It's too bad that a few days later I found the necklaces on my pillow with a bloody ear. The colony is always eager to provide me with such gifts. I move around a lot these days, never staying in one place for more than a week. I can feel the colony wanting to nest, and pretty soon, I'll have to find a place that will accommodate that desire. A safe place, where it's warm and there's plenty of fresh meat to feed on.
Whew, talk about skeletons in the closet. Nothing says scary like a horde of giant ravenous rats. Well, it's that time again. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to ensure you never miss another episode. Stay tuned for more shocking stories, and for the love of God, please clean your room. Until next time, this is Carrion Creature Feature, signing off.